This is War Junk, the podcast, based on the TV series, produced by Northern Sky Entertainment. Roll the opening.
I'm Professor David O'Keefe.
And I'm history buff and filmmaker Wayne Abbott.
Together, we travel the globe searching for war junk.
Remnants, artifacts, anything left over on the battlefields.
Some big, some small,
All with a story to tell.
and a mystery or two to solve along the way.
This is War Junk, the podcast, with Professor David O'Keefe, me, Wayne Abbott, and our special guest, Craig Mitchell. Here we are back for our second episode of War Junk, the podcast. And we're starting now with Dave and Craig. Oh, sorry, I'm knocking over my microphone here. So, gentlemen, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to see you guys. You
Good.
both well?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Everybody looks good, a little bit older, but, we're all still hanging in.
Well, in our first one podcast, we started giving a bit of the history behind War Junk and how it came to be.
Yep.
And, the center, really the focus of any of our shows, of course, was telling the story of a battle or a part of the war by what we could find on the battlefield, because it really derived, didn't it, Dave, out of just the fact that we just loved to investigate battlefields.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a track record of doing a lot of documentaries, and as a result, there was always something interesting, something fascinating, wonderful things, trouble. There was always something we were getting ourselves into.
Mhm.
So it just seemed to be that, after a while, maybe it was a good idea to turn the cameras not just on ourselves, but on our experiences.
Yeah.
And that's certainly what you got in War Junk.
Yeah, and War Junk was really, we didn't go into this much in the first podcast, but it was really three different focuses. I mean, we always had something adventurous, because War Junk, I think one of the things I really loved about the show, we did World War II, World War I battlefields, but we never showed much archival. It was present day, it was
Yep.
colorful, it was adventurous. I think when we did a show on the Somme and showed 30 seconds of archival, maybe a few photos, maybe a minute tops. And I think that's what I was so proud of War Junk, was the fact that it was just so present day and adventurous. So we always had an element of danger, intrigue, because we would get permission to dig up stuff that could kill us, right?
Well,
And seriously, we did dig up stuff we always had the personal stories, but really the other part was finding an artifact that we could tie back to a family. So we had the adventure, we had the mystery, and then we had the emotion. And that's what I loved about our shows.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that really was
Absolutely.
the holy trinity, right, of what we would do. And, some of the incredible places. And I think that was part of the allure was, what was the War Junk team going to do now? Where were they going to go? And of course, we're not going to give it all away now, but, as we go through episode by episode, there are some really adventurous moments, to say the least.
That was the scariest and most exhilarating thing I've ever done in my life.
And some very, very unique people as well. I think back to some of the just individual groups that we met when we were in Italy, when we were in France, whenever it was.
Yeah.
Man, there's some screwballs out there. And I count myself as one of them, absolutely. But I mean, they are some original people out there.
Yeah, well, you haven't blown yourself up yet.
No, I've still got all my digits so far.
Well, we did have a pretty good protocol. I mean, so everybody knew this. We uncovered gas shells, we uncovered Fiat shells, we uncovered
Explosives, everything.
grenades, everything, and we'll show you something that we uncovered in this one, in the first show in Hong Kong. But we did have a protocol to leave things in place. I guess the only time was, eventually we'll get this we'll probably touch on this in one of our podcasts and have Stain from Pond Farm on. And I think one of the only times we showed somebody picking something up is when we're at Pond Farm. But that was something that they did as a family, owning a farm that had a lot of munitions on it, that they had to take it to an area to get it picked up by the bomb squad. But otherwise, we didn't touch anything, right, Craig?
No, we left everything in situ. I mean, in fact, to be honest with you, when I saw Stain handling that, that's probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been on the show. I don't like being that close to live wilderness when somebody's kind of holding it and stuff. But it was just a daily job for these guys. You know, they get up in the morning, they go milk the cows, they go feed the chickens, and then they go pick up, high explosive shells from the field. That's what they do. So it's just a day-to-day job.
Yeah,
Well, that's a little.
Life in Flanders.
Yes, that's a little teaser for everyone. We're talking about World War One and an area that we filmed in a couple of times called Pond Farm, and we're definitely going to have Stain on if he's willing to come on and talk to us in future episodes. But we want to get back to Hong Kong because we haven't finished that story. So in the first podcast, we really focused in on our investigation in the Shingmeng Redoubt. Now, in the second part of the show in Hong Kong, Craig, you took us to a very unique place because we were searching, I think, for a cache of rifles that was supposed to be buried, and this is another mystery that we were trying to solve on the island of Hong Kong.
Yeah, no, that's right. The story goes is that just before the British and the Canadians capitulated on Christmas Day, 1941, they were actually surrounded. They were on the top of a very, very small hill and almost surrounded entirely by the Japanese. So they knew that it was already over. So they actually came down and surrendered. But before they came down, the story goes is they actually buried all of their all the weaponry, so all of their guns, mortars, things like that. So what I suspected they probably did is while they're on top of the hill, they would have dug in. They would have had a very small slit trench, a foxhole, or something like that to offer themselves a level of protection from incoming sort of mortars and what have you. So my theory is as they came down, before they wanted to give the Japanese hand over their weapons and stuff, they would have buried it in their foxholes and then sort of backfilled it with all of the soil and spoil around it. So that's what we were looking for. I mean, they were apparently at least a company up there. So it's about 100, 120 men that were up there, and they came down without their weapons. So that's what we were there to look for. And I was searching before the show. I've been searching after the show, and I can't find them anywhere. So but we gave it a valiant effort.
Well, I just remember it was our first real kind of adventurous scene in War Junk. The Shingmeng was okay, but man, you took us up. Oh yeah, it's just up this hill here. I just remember Dave and I, and I had the camera, and we're going through these bushes and small trees, and there was no real path. No, it was just like this stuff scratching us. And I'm going like, where the hell's Craig taking us?
Oh yeah, just follow me, guys. Just up this way. What the hell? I gave Dave a metal detector. He was successful finding some Canadian bullets. I think it was that we managed to identify a rifle
that was
as well.
Incredible. That was amazing because when we actually found those 303 cartridges, right? And then I remember looking at them. Yeah, and then when you looked at them, you could see where they were manufactured. And it turned out that, here I have to fly halfway around the world to go to Hong Kong, that, to find something, an artifact that was made 20 minutes from my cottage in Quebec City at Dominion Arsenal. It was insane to be able to have something that literally connected me with my home and my family that I find off a battlefield all these years later in Hong Kong, a battlefield that literally was just a couple of days. It really amazing.
Well, I have a clip for you. Don't think it's that exact scene. This is literally the first time we find a piece of real war junk on the show. So I'll play it.
Hello.
Have you got something down there?
Yeah, take a look at this.
Wow, let's have a look what you got.
Look at this, 2 of them, eh?
Well, you got a 303 there.
Looks like both a 303, right?
Just on top of the...
Yeah, look at this, just hanging out on the ground. I mean, it makes sense when you've got rock surface and everything here.
And their rifle.
Look at that, that's so cool. How do you know their rifle is supposed to...
From the pin.
From the pin, yeah.
That tiny little pin there's a rifle one. A Bren would have a much deeper sort of a rectangle square.
Rectangle,
yeah, to it. Wow. And if we, very carefully, if we're lucky enough to get a little bit of a head stamp, we might be able to try and narrow down where this came from. We can tell from the head stamp on here that these were most likely not from the Canadians, but probably from either the Royal Scots were in this area, or Dockyard Defence Unit as well. These were made in the UK.
From the head stamp, you can tell exactly where and when the shell was made. On this one, the RL stands for Royal Laboratories, which was located outside of London. It was made in 1933 and is a Mark VII type cartridge.
Either way, these are, these little pieces of war junk are basically, souvenirs from Christmas Day.
Lying right there on the surface,
Yeah, all these years later.
Good start, mate. First 5 minutes.
It's our first piece.
The first piece of war junk. Yeah, there it is.
There we go. Our first piece. That was exciting. I mean, that was a lot of ping, ping, ping right away.
And there's no other reason people are up there, so it's not really a very worn hiking trail or anything like that. So you're not having just debris falling off, people wandering through. So all of those beeps that we were getting up there were dating back to 1941. So it just goes to show you how much metal is still left around in the ground.
Yeah, especially that location, because I know, for instance, in the Shinmun, I know that the British Army, when they were on occupation, or at least over there during, I shouldn't say occupation, but when they were on duty there right up until 1997, they used to use the Shinmun for various exercises and things like that. So without a doubt, you can find some modern stuff. But as far as I know, Bennett's Hill is not part of the training regime over there. I mean, that was a pretty kind of remote area.
Well, you just found them sitting there behind the rock. You could tell that a soldier was behind that rock firing, and the cartridges went down. And it's also neat. I just love the little bit of history we could give in each of those shows. I mean, I didn't know that until we did that show, that you could actually look at a cartridge and you get all that information from the year to the factory that made it. And I just found that quite fascinating.
I think it's also quite telling as well that you found the two cartridges right on the very top. I mean, they weren't sunken in, they weren't stepped on, they weren't concealed or buried. It goes to show you how hard that ground is. There is no soil in Hong Kong, especially on the very top of a hill there, where you've got no litter over the years to try and build up. So I mean, those soldiers having to dig into what was granite, pure granite. So again, just finding things like that as clear as on the ground there gives you a little bit more of an idea of what that situation would have been like, that those poor soldiers would have been in.
Yeah, because even if you had a shovel, it's hard to dig any kind of a trench or a hole or a foxhole to get in, right?
Oh, mate, you're just chipping against hard rock. You can't go anywhere. It would have been a nightmare. So,
Dave, you were saying before that I guess after that scene, you found some more cartridges.
Yeah.
They were our hometown cartridges, basically.
Yeah, they were. They were everywhere up there. I mean, that was the amazing part. But like I said, the fascinating part was, to go all these, halfway around the world to pick up an artifact from the Battle of Hong Kong that was actually directly tied to the place that's outside of, that's part of our family. As a matter of fact, my wife's grandfather was one of the managers at the Dominion Arsenal during the war. So, and that kind of right there, that kind of encapsulates in some ways what war junk was all about. In other words, these tiny little pieces of artifacts that somehow bring you together, sort of connect the dots in some way. And it's like I said before, something I couldn't explain, still can't explain, but it's powerful. It's emotional, to say the least.
But also, Bennett's Hill gave us some other stories, because I mean, we got lots of cartridges up there. The metal detectors were ringing constantly, but then I just remember we kind of, I don't know, gave up on searching, and Craig went further up the hill, and we found him in a ditch full of soda cans. And then he found something spectacular, and I want to show this scene, or the end of the scene, because it was extraordinary. And this is where we definitely saw Craig in his element, didn't we, Dave?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
The detector is giving off this incredible sound, unlike anything I've heard so far.
It's big.
Watch out, watch out. Oh, yes.
Holy Jesus, what is that?
Oh, that's nice. There we go, look at that. A shell or a rock?
I don't know, mate. I don't know just yet. Let's just take it a little bit easy. Okay, we want to leave this. This is a grenade. That's a Mills grenade. It's a round item that big.
Yeah.
Slightly curved. Pineapple.
Pineapple in shape. We got a grenade.
I think so. The Japanese are a lot straighter down the side and they have a much squarer bottom, whereas this is slightly curved. And if you look carefully down there, you can almost see the pineapple shape. And then just to confirm what it is, this is actually the top end. And just there, you can sort of see like a very small circle about the size of my finger. And that is actually where the filler cap goes. So they make the grenade casing, and then they pour the TNT into that, and then they fill it up when they're ready to ship it. So that just confirms that this is actually a British or a Canadian M36 grenade.
You have no clue now by looking at this whether the pin's in or not?
No, we don't. We don't know if that's been thrown and it's a dud, or if it's still got the safety latch and pin attached.
And being here for 70 years may not be in stable condition anyway.
I wouldn't have thought so.
If this thing goes off?
10-meter kill radius, gone.
Well, I guess that's the end of our journey today, because if we go any farther, it just may be our last one.
Let's head for a dignified retreat, shall we?
Definitely, yes. Beat a hasty retreat out of here.
Let's do it.
That's it. Oh, man. I love the way Craig just almost gets out of the pit when he says it's a grenade.
There's nothing more to see here.
But that was the first time we uncovered something that was as dangerous as a grenade. I mean,
Could go boom. Yeah.
That's what battlefields are all about, aren't they?
Wasn't the last time.
No.
Yeah. But it was extraordinary to see you at that point, and just because that's cut down. I mean, it lasted much longer, because you took your time in digging it. And
yeah, I think as soon as there was a layer of cans, wasn't there? A layer of soda cans, Coke cans, or whatever it was. So once we removed that, and I couldn't see any kind of modern debris, and I was still getting a big hit, and I could kind of tell the size of it and stuff. The old red flag started to get raised there. So yeah, we slowed it right the way down, and just slowly just moved away layer upon layer of the dirt on the top there with a screwdriver until we kind of got the outline. And then, as you saw in the video there, as soon as we could identify what it was, hands off, leave it as it is. Let's call the professionals and let them deal with it. So and that's what we did. And that is our standard practice. If we know, as soon as we recognize what it is, if we don't recognize what it is, leave it alone. And if we do recognize what it is, and we know it's a little bit dangerous, hazardous, we leave it alone. So that is our policy that keeps us going.
it's still one of the best lines in any War Junk show. A dignified retreat.
With me trembling like that in the background, trying to look brave at the same time.
Yeah, but I remember we left, and it was the most beautiful sunset leaving Bennett's Hill. Yeah, and that was really a great afternoon, wasn't it, Dave? I mean, that just I think it proved to us at that point that we had something here. I mean, this was that this show and what we could do with it, and where we could go with it. We really truly believed it. I think I just remember just being just so happy after that shoot.
Yeah, it was. It was really beautiful to be able to stand up there and really soak in the context of Hong Kong at that time. Mm-hmm. And even though, for instance, you can see all the, the building and the improvement that's been done since the war, you still got a sense of what it would have been like to be up there and be isolated, know you're surrounded, and know you're not going home, or at least it's going to take a while before you do. So there was, that was one thing I think that's never escaped any of us, is when we're on these battlefields, that, as much as an adventure as it could be, because of our passion and our curiosity, we also understand what this, particular ground means. And that certainly was the feeling coming off of Bennett's Hill for sure.
Definitely. And it's also makes Hong Kong so unique, because even though we're on Bennett's Hill and you realize not many people go up there, the city's around you. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of places where, Craig's taking us up on the hills of Hong Kong, and all you do is you look over and you got skyscrapers here, skyscrapers there. And it's a very unique battlefield from, you go to an area that's very remote, but really just a kilometer or so away is big city.
Yeah. I think for me, the one big impression was when we were in the Shingmun Redoubt, which is in Kowloon, which is north, when we were up at Gin Drinkers Line, which used to go right into Gin Drinkers Bay. Well, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gin Drinkers Bay, let me say that again, doesn't exist anymore. It's all been filled in, and there's like 750,000 people or something who live in the bay
Yeah,
now.
it's basically a container port these days. It's Hong Kong's main container port. So it's where Gin Drinkers Bay was now is probably at least 200 meters reclaimed land now. So yeah, no, it's going to be full of buildings and trucks and what have you. So yeah, the layout of the land here has changed quite considerably over the last 80 or 90 odd years or whatever it was. So yeah, I think you get a very small sense of it in that very last second of the clip you just showed there. You see us coming down to the hills there, and you see the sea in the background. You see like the big tree, you see the big skyscrapers and stuff like that. But when you turn around the other direction, you see nothing. You just see like hills and reservoirs and stuff like that. So it's a very unusual place for Hong Kong for having all of this sort of history and modern conveniences so close together.
Oh, it's great. And if anybody does go to Hong Kong, I recommend, especially on the island, there's so much good hiking. You don't have to just go for the war artifacts. I mean, you could be in Causeway Bay and you take a short cab ride, and all of a sudden you're up in a remote area on an amazing hike. So I love it. So let's do a transition, because now in our first episode, we introduced the artifact, the personal artifact that we found. So to kind of get people back in the story who might not have seen the first episode, Craig uncovered a very special artifact that we started researching. So I'm going to play you the clip that was in the first episode. I'm going to play it again, so it really sets up really the rest of the show, War Junk Battle of Hong Kong. So let's see, here it goes.
Sometimes the little things that really get your attention. Now this, of all the things you have here, this kind of caught my eye because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. It looks like it's an M, and then I think that's a C, am I right?
That's right, yes. It's been broken in half and it's a little bit bent, so...
What was it?
I believe it is half of a Royal Army Medical Corps shoulder flash.
Royal Army Medical Corps.
I believe it came across the top there. I found it not so far away,
Where?
just over there, just by where that petrol station is, just over there, not too far away.
So what do you know about it so far?
I've narrowed it down through a little bit of research to maybe about 5 or 6 individuals who I think it could have come from.
Well, that would make sense because there weren't a lot of Royal Army Medical Corps.
There would have only been a handful in this particular location.
Wow. 70 years later, this is pulled from the ground. So if you've narrowed this down to 5, you haven't been able to go any farther with the research?
That's as far as I've got so far.
Now, this is what War Junk's all about. This is a mystery that needs to be solved. So with your permission, we're going to take some photographs of this, and we're going to send it back to our research team, and then let's see if we can actually take this little piece of war junk and put a face or a name to this.
Anything you could uncover on that would be wonderful.
All right, that's what we're going to do now.
Be wonderful.
Fantastic.
Wow. So that's it. I mean, and how long before we got there did you find this shoulder flash?
I probably had that in my sort of collection, as it were, probably about 2 years beforehand. But I didn't really know the significance of it. I mean, at first, I actually found that, within the first couple of months of me ever trying metal detecting. And at that time there, I was so enthusiastic. I kept everything, buckets and buckets of just twisted metal and everything. So I just had that as part of a collection. And then one day I got given a document, and it's a really nerdy document. It's about how to identify Japanese artillery shells by using fragments and bits and pieces and stuff. So I was like, I got some items up there that I might be able to try to find a bit more information. And as I'm cleaning up this various thing there, I started noticing a little bit more lettering there. And then it kind of dawned on me, this is actually a little bit more significant than just a piece of shrapnel. So that's why I then kept it. And luckily, I kind of remembered I was very enthusiastic at this stage here, logging down all the details of what I found, where I found it and stuff. So I had a pretty good idea exactly where I found it. But it was very fortunate. And then being able to then hook up with you guys and then, to develop this story further and then take it to the end, it was very, very moving.
So you literally thought it was a piece of shrapnel. It was like encased in mud?
Yeah, I didn't clean it up. I just thought it was a piece of rubbish, but I just kept it there just in case. And then 2 years later, just scrubbing it away with a bit of an old toothbrush or whatever it was. And hello, this is interesting.
That's extraordinary because I guess it does seem like, I think when you first told me, you have this shoulder flash, I thought, well, how the hell are we ever going to figure out what soldier, who the soldier was who lost that? And it was only half a shoulder flash as well. But it is unique though, the Battle of Hong Kong, and why is that, Craig?
Basically, because of the duration. I mean, because it was such a dynamic battle that we have very good records of where people were on any given day, and any given hour of any given day. So we kind of know the movement and the flow of the battle. So if we're in a particular location and we find a British item, we know that it must have happened before this date, because at X time on this day, the Japanese then took over this position and the British couldn't have dropped it there. So what we find in the location, we can then tie up with battle reports, and we have a very, very good, accurate idea of who was in what position and the equipment they were using, because that's what we're finding. So I think that's what makes Hong Kong really unique, is that we have because the whole of the Battle of Hong Kong on Hong Kong Island only lasted a week, and that was the main the fighting. There was a little bit of fighting on the mainland in Xingmun, but the majority of the heavy fighting all took place on Hong Kong Island within a week. So we've got a very good idea of the flow of the battle. So it gives a pretty good idea of where people were.
Yeah, it certainly narrows it down quite a bit, because you can get a list of Royal Army Medical Corps personnel who were there, but just because you get their name doesn't mean you're going to get the circumstances. And this is where I think serendipity came, because I'm not sure if it was us finding that or that it finding us, but Wayne and I had an experience in the archives in London that defies rational explanation other than pure dumb luck. I mean, I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah, because we were shooting another show, Dieppe Uncovered, at the time, and so we were over in the archives. And again, everybody who's listening or watching, I mean, when you do these TV shows, you do design them. It looks like things are unfolding in front of camera, but it's planned, a lot of it, not everything, but some of it's planned. And we had a number of names that Craig gave us, because you said in that clip there was 5 people. So we were looking for any kind of documentation. And we also had our trusty research team looking as well. So I'm going to play a clip here from what Dave said, where we reveal in the show the documentation that helps solve the mystery. So this is the first of a couple of scenes we're gonna play, but this is what I call the evidence.
After the incredible expedition to Bennett's Hill, we received great news regarding the shoulder flash that Craig found. 2 files were sent to us overnight from our research team. These reports could help solve the mystery.
It was written by a sergeant from the Royal Army Medical Corps who survived the battle. And the interesting part is he narrows down our choices to 3 men who were with him. It's either a Captain Barclay, a Private Evans, or a Private Jones.
Well, Barclay is what the research team talked about.
That's right.
First, right? But
yeah, well, it gets better. They were all taken prisoner at the advanced dressing station. They were then marched up a hill where they were tied to trees, tortured. They made an incredible daring escape. Now, the interesting part for us, they ended up splitting up and going in separate directions. Evans and Jones one way, Barclay the other.
well, that's good info.
So if we can get Craig to take us to where he found this, and we cross-reference it with their directions, then we'll know.
This is big. This is huge.
It was big and huge. I mean,
it was. And we got to tell a little bit of background story of actually finding that one report. And I think, Craig, you were doing some digging on your end. But with Wayne and I, of course, doing stuff like this, we work rather intimate. And you become like brothers to the point where as much as you love each other, you also want to kill each other. And when we were in London, I don't know what it was, but we were just at each other's throats in London the entire time we were there. So we went to the archives, and we were working on Dieppe. And Wayne, Wayne's a filmmaker, and he does his research too. But at the same time, that's not what he necessarily loves to do. And you and I are more dorky, and we'll spend a lot of time in these things. And so my recollection of this was that we were getting on each other's nerves, and I just wanted to shut you up. So I ordered a bunch of Hong Kong files so I could work on Dieppe. And I was like, here, Wayne, just take these damn files. And I'll never forget the first one that popped up. You opened it up and went, hey, Hong Kong, hey. And then you read the atrocity report that we were referencing right there. The first page of the first document in a giant stack that you got. And
Yeah, I think it was something close to that. I don't remember I was upsetting you that much. I just get bored in the archives sometimes.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, no, it just said Japanese atrocity, something like that. And then right down there, you see Barclay's name. So we did find that piece of information. But then Craig also had the other report. But I don't think we really still tied it together until this scene happened. Okay, I'm going to play you the next scene that followed in the show. And I remember when we were doing it, I don't think we were 100% certain until, Craig took us through what was in the files. And then, we had a big revelation. So let's play this.
So in the report, where it keeps referring to the medical aid post, it is just behind me on that slope just there.
So that's where it would have been in 1941?
That's right. That's where they would have been held captive for a couple of days until they surrendered, and then they came out.
After that, they said something about taken to a place overlooking this aid station.
Is that they were taken over to that hill just over there. So this is it.
So this is the area then that's overlooking the dressing station.
Which is just down there. And this is, I suspect, the area where they were tied to a tree. They were tortured until they made their daring escape. And where it says down here that 2 of them decided to head towards Shaki 1, that's that direction.
Okay.
But Barclay, Captain Barclay, he decides to go to Stanley.
Which is where?
Which is that direction.
Barclay's decision to go to Stanley is an interesting one. It was the location of the hospital where he worked, and eventually the last Allied stronghold before the surrender.
And this is the exact spot I found it.
Right here?
Right here, right here.
This tiny little piece of war junk was right here. Now, how far are we away from where they split up?
We're about 400 meters to the south of where they were held against a tree.
Okay.
But what really makes this interesting, Barclay headed towards Stanley. Stanley is this direction, while his other comrades went the other direction.
Okay, that's not just interesting, lad. That seals it. I mean, this is the only thing that was here. Barclay was the only person who came by here, the only one who could have been wearing a Royal Army Medical Corps shoulder flash.
That's what it looks like.
So there's only one conclusion. This has to be Barclay's.
Right here.
And I think it was
Still
that
got goosebumps.
scene shooting it. Yeah, oh yeah, goosebumps. But I don't think we went into it because we're so new to the whole concept. What I remember is like we had this stuff, and it was that day where Craig just took us around there, and I think it was the revelation at that point, which was so cool and so great.
The preponderance of the evidence shows that there was no other Royal Army Medical Corps personnel in that area. So the only possible explanation that we have is that it would have come from Barclay's uniform.
And I think also the fact that it was half a shoulder flash. I mean, those things don't just snap. You don't get them snagged on a tree and they snap. That they're pretty. They're brass. They're strong. So something violent must have happened for that thing to break. So again, it just adds another layer of information to this whole story that is quite fascinating.
Yeah, because we did eventually find out that Barclay, of course, his body was never recovered. So we can assume as well that, Barclay possibly died in that location. But yeah, I mean, again, we couldn't have done this if we found that same artifact in a World War I battlefield. We could never deduce that it was one soldier. But because there was only 4 or 5 of the Royal Medical soldiers in that area, we could narrow it down. And I think that file and that report where 2 guys went one way and Barclay went the other, I mean, yeah, as Craig says, gives you goosebumps. And it was a great scene and a wonderful story. But we did continue because at that point, we wanted to tie it to a family. We did find Captain Barkley's son, Jim, who lives in New Zealand, and he had to, we didn't do a show prior to this. So when some crazy Canadian, I remember I woke him up because New Zealand is 17 hours difference. And I thought it was, I don't know what I thought it was. And first time I called Jim, I think it was 2 or 3 in the morning and woke him up and
Must
said,
have loved
"Hey."
you.
So, Jim, I mean, it's amazing that our research team found you so quickly.
And quite frankly, a shock.
Shocked that we called you in regards to your
Yes,
father.
absolutely.
He took a big chance to come up. He was, I think, only 4 months old. He was born in Hong Kong, 4 months old when he left the island with his mother and his other siblings, and never got to know his father. So I'm going to play you the scene where I think Craig is explaining to Jim Barkley the story of the shoulder flash and where it was located.
About a year ago, we found a very small item on the floor. I've managed to identify it as being a shoulder flash coming from a Royal Army Medical Corps. Would you like to hold it?
How extraordinary. How do you think that's related to my father?
And it was just over here. This is the exact spot where I found that shoulder flash, and it does tie in with the accounts that we've uncovered where it says that your father was detained up over on this location here. He was heading straight over towards Stanley, which is that direction there.
It feels extraordinary. I came with a quite open mind, but fairly cynical and sort of skeptical about what I would find, and what I've discovered is really shed a new light and new insights onto my father's life. And so this is the last known place where he would have gone past. The location all ties in with the written reports of the time, and I'm more than totally convinced that this belongs to my father.
Another great scene.
Ooh. Even all these years later, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
God,
No,
there's so many great.
I contacted Jim to come on, and he didn't want to at this point, but I think once he listens to the podcast, Jim, you can come on and talk to us at any time, because you are our first family, war junk family that came over and trusted us. And the one thing that Jim wasn't close to his father. His mother never.
Yeah.
We say this in the show. He says it to me when we're driving, is that he was never close to his father. Didn't know his father, but his mother never talked about his father. So even when we contacted him, he was 70 when we filmed this, he always felt distant. Like he was never emotionally attached to his father.
Yeah.
But he was still willing to come up. And I think he had a 2-day journey that was extraordinary.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of takeaways that I have from this one. And one of them was the story where he never really thought about his father.
Mm-hmm.
From what he told us, his stepfather, who his mother met when the war was over and remarried, raised him as if he was his own. So to him, that was his father. And then after we called, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he went up into the attic or barn or somewhere and found the chest that she had put all of her memorabilia about her first husband in. And I think it was a real awakening for him, because he was reading all their letters and he was seeing the photographs. And the other takeaway is when he arrived, he had a photograph of his father from 1940 or 41. And he was the spitting image of his father, except he was 70. His father would have been like 29 at the time. That's just one of the many takeaways that I have, particularly from this part of the show, for sure. It was special.
I also just remember us having to, thinking about the story of what actually happened to Barkley, and we were really worried about having to tell Jim. We didn't know what he thought about it, and it was a really delicate story. I mean, the details we haven't talked about just now, but I mean, it was horrific what his father had to go through. I mean, his final few hours of on the planet here, they weren't pleasant, so stuff, but it was horrific what he had to deal with.
Well, what we did in a scene that, I'll probably just run some images over this, is the fact that Dave actually let him read the files when we first met him. So he saw the file that we found in the archives that had Japanese atrocities and talked about the story of being tied to a tree and beaten, and then they escaped. But I think it really helped him understand his dad, and and that he was a hero. And I think the next scene here, I'm going to play the last minute or so of the show because this was very poignant, and talk about unexpected. Because Jim had one request. He wanted to see his father's gravesite. And I don't know, being our first show, we didn't really plan that far ahead like we did in the other ones. And we just, okay, there's one Commonwealth cemetery. We're just going to go up. What's it called, Craig? The cemetery?
Saiwan Cemetery, yeah.
Taiwan. And we went there, and I'm just going to, play it, and then we'll talk after, because it was such a touching moment for all of us. Here's the final scene of War Junk Battle of Hong Kong.
Yeah, there's some things that are rather unexpected in this. And we arrived here at the Saiwan Military Cemetery to bring Jim to see the grave of his father. When we arrived, we were a little shocked to find out that there is no grave.
We thought we had a plot number, and it actually is a column number, which means his name is etched on a wall of soldiers whose bodies were never found. We had to tell him there was no grave, that Captain Barkley was never found, and I don't know how he was going to take it.
We realized that there is no plot, only his name on the wall, meaning his body was never found.
We then walk Jim to the wall of the missing. It's here he sees his father's name etched on the wall for the very first time. It's so emotional as Jim reaches up to touch his father's name, the father he never knew. Holding the piece of shoulder flash in one hand, he wipes away his tears with the other.
The start and the end of a journey. Because I just didn't know that this existed, and I didn't know this existed. I knew that he was buried here, and I thought he was buried here, and now I know he was never found.
We end the scene with Jim standing in front of the wall. The graphics read, "There is no information as to whatever happened to Captain Barkley, but most likely he never made it to Stanley."
I'm going to cry again. Bawling at that point.
Wow.
Moving.
Yeah, that was. Yep.
I mean, for a man that he'd never met before, as I know it was his father, but just to go through that sort of emotional ride with him over that 48-hour period, it was tough.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, when I guess the day before, and I was in the van with him, and he's telling me the story and how he didn't have an emotional attachment to his father. And then to, introduce him to the story, you took him to the site. And then when we went to the cemetery, you could see those were tears that I think even shocked him. But he became so close, I think, to the father he never met or didn't grow up with. It was a very powerful story. It just really just it's one of the scenes that I'm most proud of, and one of the stories that I just love the most out of the War Junk series.
I was just saying, can you imagine what was going through Jim's head when he was on that flight back to New Zealand, sat there for 16 hours? I mean, you can't imagine the thoughts that he was going through. It's a very moving moment.
Yeah. That was the moment, I think, that really sold me on the series. I really didn't know what it was we were doing when we went there. But after that, I knew exactly what we were doing.
It clicked into place, didn't it? All the pieces just fell into place.
And you still can't explain it, but you saw it there. It's powerful. Yeah. There is something about that connection. And that was the wonderful, wonderful moment. And it was, he's just such a wonderful man.
Wonderful man. But it just goes to show that we could take, this piece of junk, because that's what that shoulder flash was, encased in mud. You didn't even know what it was for 2 years. And just amazing amount of luck to find those files and then be able to tie it in. And Jim taking the risk to come up with a bunch of Canadian filmmakers and a Hong Kong digger And to tell that story that this half a shoulder flash, and it just gave him a window into his father's life.
And that's just one story from one man. We could come up with a story for every single person that was involved in that battle, and come up with something equally amazing and equally, equally as emotionally driven and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's just it's not the item; it's the story behind the item and the people behind that story that really make everything come together, isn't it?
Yeah, well said. That was the fun of the show. You just never knew what you were going to find at the end of the day.
Yeah,
we had a few wild goose chases, but some of the stories of successes were pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was such a co-viewing show, and that's what I was most proud of. And I also wanted to mention too, and I want people who are listening or viewing this to write us. We do have an email at warjunkpodcast@gmail.com, or go to our Facebook page and contact us if you have stories that you want to tell, because we'd love to bring you on future podcasts. But it was the one show. I mean, Dave and I just got off a big History Channel show, which was fun, called The Bermuda Triangle Under Cursed Waters. And we were looking at new shipwrecks and plane wrecks. And it was great. And lots of good mysteries and great shipwrecks and plane wrecks found. But I don't know if it generated the kind of social media we got. We got pages and pages. I mean, every year, when in 2014, then 15 and 16, I mean, we would get hundreds and hundreds of messages off of our Facebook page, Twitter, people just writing to us. I mean, it was women who would write to us and said, "Oh my God, you made me cry with this story." And then men would write and say, "You're doing what I want to do."
Yeah, exactly.
Children and parents would write about sitting down as a family. And that's what I loved about War Junk, is that this co-viewing, and it had a bit of everything. And I think I hadn't seen the War Junk show, War Junk Hong Kong, for years, and just seeing these clips. And that was when we didn't know what we were doing, to be honest. We went in there, we thought it was a 30-minute show, it was going to be light. And we ended up telling that story, and it set the parameters for all the other shows following.
Yeah. I mean, at one point we thought it was going to be a mockumentary when the monkeys attacked. I mean, how else could you play that?
Yes, but we did have fun. Yeah, there was fun as well in it. But we always were aware of not to, go too funny or to be too insincere. We wanted to respect the stories that we were telling. Well, guys, we got 2 parts out of our first show, and a little insight into what we were doing, and I think a lot of insight, thanks to Craig, into the Battle of Hong Kong, which is still one of the most unique battlefields if people can get there to visit.
It was a great experience. I'd lovely catching up with you guys, and hopefully we can come together with a few more stories to tell.
Oh, we will. We have lots of stories to tell. And if anybody does want to reach us, please go to our Facebook page or email us at warjunkpodcast@gmail.com. So, gentlemen, thank you. Any last words, Dave?
No, not really. It was just good that the monkeys didn't show up. It was nice to see Craig, though.
Lovely to see you
off on that.
Excellent. Well, until next time, guys, we'll be talking a few more War Junk stories in the coming weeks.
Take care now.
Take care, guys.
This has been War Junk, the podcast, hosted by Professor David O'Keefe and me, Wayne Abbott. Special guest, Craig Mitchell. Please write us at warjunkpodcast@gmail.com, and you can watch the podcast on our YouTube channels, War Junk the Podcast and War Junk TV. This is a Northern Sky Entertainment production.